Hey, I'm Tony Shaffer, President of the London Center for Policy Research, and I'm here today for one of our latest thought to actions on a very interesting topic, one of Russia and Putin. And for those who enjoy our content, please follow us, like, share, subscribe on YouTube. We're on all the social media. The London Center works very hard to provide a range of topics and a range of issues that are of interest to all Americans and frankly, the international community. Today, we're going to be talking about some issues which overlap both U.S. national security and essentially global stability. And that's why we're here to talk today with the author of Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America, Rebekah Koffler. Rebekah, good afternoon, and thank you for joining me for Thought to Action.
Good afternoon, Tony. Glad to be here.
Great. So you have a very interesting background, one I admire greatly. Appreciate not only your willingness to document something, but have the courage to push through and get it out. So I'm going to kind of break down our discussion today into three parts. First, I want to talk a little bit about your background. Second, I want to talk about the book itself, about what you think regarding Russia and Putin. And then last, kind of the challenge of getting the book out. So let's go through those three things together today, and let's start with who you are and why you're here to talk to us about Vladimir Putin and Russia.
Sure, thank you. So I was born and raised behind the Iron Curtain in the former Soviet Union. And I came to the United States in 1989. So I'm Russian by birth, American by choice. After the September 11th, I wanted to go into national security, and I really wanted to be an intelligence officer to help protect this great country, the land of freedom and opportunity that's done a lot for me. I wanted to protect the country from foreign threats. So when George Bush Jr. called on first-generation Americans to join the intelligence community, I was all in. Eventually, I joined the DIA, and I proudly served as an intelligence officer and a specialist on Russian doctrine and strategy. And then after I left, I decided to write a book on the Russian threat to America.
So you are completely qualified to speak on this topic. It's very clear that from your background, from essentially your birth on, you have been able to essentially not only understand the culture of Russia, you've lived it, and therefore I think you're a great arbiter of individuals' actions within that culture. Would you agree with that? I hate to sound like a lawyer, but would you agree with that question?
Yes, one of the, I would agree with you, Colonel Shaffer. That's sort of one of the things that I thought I brought to the table.
Exactly. Yeah.
In the intelligence community is that understanding of the Russian mindset and how people like Putin, a former KGB colonel, who was raised in the same environment that I was raised, indoctrinated in the communist and socialist ideology, and indoctrinated in the notion that America was Russia's rather primary threat, enemy number one, главный противник, they used to call it. So that's what I thought was important for intelligence analysts to understand when they actually make assessment about things like Putin's intentions and doctrine and strategy that guides Russia's actions, especially with respect to the United States.
So, yeah, I think this is a key point that people have forgotten. Before you came to the United States, as a very young second lieutenant, my job was to work counterterrorism and counterintelligence issues relating to stopping the Soviet Union. As a matter of fact, some of my early assignments were in Germany, actually facing off against terrorist organizations, German terrorist organizations that were being funded by the Russians. So, Rebekah, I would argue that the American people, especially the government, has forgotten the very challenges that have resulted in that even through the transition from the Soviet Union to the Russian Republic, those animosities still exist. The challenges that existed before the Cold War, before the wall fell, those animosities have not resolved themselves in any great degree. Would you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely. They never went away. Unfortunately, what happened was the Washington establishment has taken the eyes off the ball, including within the intelligence community. There was an expectation that Russia was going to all of a sudden become a democratic society. Right. And was no longer a threat and was not an adversary. So all of the assets, all of the resources, and you know better than I do, were directed towards war on terror. Right. Meanwhile, there was a huge gap with regard to collection on Russia. Such important military drills as the one that is taking place today between a joint military drill between Russia and Belarus called Zapad. Zapad means West. And that's one of the strategic level exercises where they game out war scenarios with the United States and with Europe, right? So collection did not exist on this level of target, I would say, intelligence target, that is. And so obviously we are reaping the results today. As you know, Russia has been conducting cyber warfare targeting the United States for 20 years. And we are incapable of responding. At least so far, you know, we have not responded with any kind of force that would deter the Russians and Putin from continuing this type of attack on the United States. If anything, they'll plan to escalate them.
Right. So an active measures campaign is a comprehensive set of actions. You talk about this in your book, which I do recommend people read. It's very important for people to understand in detail the methodology and activities. But I want to differentiate between what the Soviets plan to do and want to do and the Russia collusion narrative, because I think what's happened is that the left, who does understand much of what we're talking about regarding active measures, I think they use it often in their own political actions regarding deception, manipulation, and that sort of thing. So the progressive left, I would tend to argue, has incorporated this thinking. They have commingled in a way that I think is very dangerous to our national security, the fact that they had a false narrative they created for the Russia collusion narrative, using essentially the fear of Russia, legitimate fear, the legitimate fear of active measure campaigns, which are being used. But Rebekah, I would argue that they're doing this Russia collusion narrative, which has been disproven completely. They have actually weakened our ability to detect the Russian actual active measures campaign. Could you tell me if I'm right or wrong about that and give me a few thoughts?
Absolutely correct. So not only they have co-opted what I call Putin's Playbook, which largely consists of the active measure plus the rest of the instruments that Putin plans to use to weaken and destabilize the United States. So not only the left adapted that playbook, they've actually used it against the American people, right, effectively doing Putin's bidding. What do I mean by that? Yes, Russia absolutely aimed to interfere in 2016 election, and they did so in 2 subsequent elections. Right. But unlike what the corrupt intelligence officials presented to the American people, which is absolute disinformation, you know, of the so-called Russia-Trump collusion, Russia's aim was not to elect Trump. They know they can't possibly do it. Exactly. American people, elect the American president. The Russians were trying to sow discord and foment unrest and instability, which is very consistent with the Russian doctrine. But the intelligence community put out this completely falsified and politicized the so-called ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment, that only 3 agencies signed on to, as opposed to the 18th. As you know, the ICA is one of the flagship products of the DNI, and they have to be signed on by everybody. Well,
and just so everybody's clear, an intelligence community assessment. So let's make sure the audience is clear on what we're talking about. So
right. Thank you.
This is a hugely important document. One, by the way, Rebekah, on this point, from the time they tasked this to the time it was produced, it was record time. I think it was like 2 months or something. I mean, it's unheard of. And I've seen these things take upwards of years to be thorough and complete. This thing was a complete fabrication.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. And that is what's outrageous. You know, in fact, it was less than 2 months.
Yeah.
Obama gave orders
it was a joke.
in about December, January 6, 2017, they came out with a declassified version. It is absolutely impossible. I've been part of these, NIEs, ICAs, and all of these products. And you know what? Typical, I think the last one that I was part of, it took 2 years.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just virtually impossible. Right. And so the ICA was politicized. You know, it concluded that the Russians wanted to harm Clinton and to help elect Trump. And that is either an incompetent assessment or a falsified assessment, or both. And I believe that it was dangerous for these intelligence officials, such as James Clapper, James Comey, and, Brennan, to do this to the American people, because what happened was they dragged the country through years and years of frivolous investigations and sowing effectively discord and polarizing the society. And this is exactly what Putin wanted to happen.
No, I've argued that many folks on the left who did this actually inadvertently became Putin's best weapon. I think Putin probably looked at this every day as a complete gift, like, man, I didn't do this, but I wish I could have. Because to your point, I think the issue of discord in elections is something the Russians do to any number of countries. They've been working to do the same active measure campaign in Europe for purposes of destabilizing their democratic process. So it's very interesting. And I really do hope people will check out your book, because I think you're able to lay out kind of the framework that people need to understand. And also, I think you'll have a better understanding of the left, because they were able to essentially pick up on these extreme tactics and use them for their own political gain. Now, let's go back for one moment before we move on to the book itself and kind of how you got here, to James Clapper and James Comey. First off, I know Clapper. I've got a letter somewhere where he approved my promotion to GS-12 as a very young Air Force civilian case officer. So I know the man. I've briefed him several times. Jim Clapper strikes me as someone completely incapable of understanding anything but the most basic concepts of intelligence. And then Comey, the same way. These men seem to be much more career bureaucrats than they are brilliant statisticians. In other words, neither of these men have the brain to be able to do this on their own. What do you make of these guys being the face of something which I would argue had to be a very complex, very complicated process? Who is really pushing this? Because those men aren't capable of this level of deep thinking.
You know, Tony, I've thought about the very same question many times, and it is honestly a mystery to me. You mentioned that Clapper, that you're personally familiar with Clapper. He signed your promotion. So interestingly, as I reveal in the book, I won in a highly competitive process, a very important position within the intelligence community, the deputy NIO for cyber. NIO stands for National Intelligence Officer.
Right.
So this was a number 2 position in the intelligence community for cyber. And supposedly James Clapper signed off on that. And I was supposed to on board for the position. Well, all of a sudden, 2 weeks prior, I was informed that I couldn't start my position.
Yeah.
And so when the whole thing unfolded with the so-called Russia, collusion, the non-existent collusion that the Mueller investigation debunked itself. So I was scratching my head and I was wondering, well, were there plans at the same time to really politicize, this sort of intelligence? And as you know, as a Russian speaker and as someone who always spoke truth to power, which is what we're supposed to do, right? As an intel people, I wondered that there was already a feeling that, they couldn't get away with that, and that that's why I wasn't allowed to take that position. So it is a mystery to me. I don't know, Tony. Do you have your own versions?
That's an important distinction, though, because I think one of the things I've recognized, we share this this common, I don't know if it's a common experience or torture, having worked for Defense Intelligence Agency, because DIA, my experience is they are not an honest organization, nor do they seek the truth. Generally speaking, you have individuals such as yourself, and I'd like to believe everything I did was focused on trying to achieve specific objectives for military planning and military operations. Much of that organization is focused on trying to fulfill information that will help support a political narrative, a narrative that is not necessarily supported by objective truth. And I think that's what you're saying here is basically someone who's honest in the system, who actually goes in to be in a senior position, unless you're willing to toe the line or take a knee, they're not going to let you actually do your job. At least that's my impression.
Absolutely. That's my impression too. So that once they figure out that you are not going to advocate the party line, just like in the Soviet Union.
Right. There you go. Wow. Yeah.
Yes, they will hunt you down, and but they usually run this, disinformation on you, saying, the explanation to me was, we want to keep our golden tickets at home. Right. So on the one hand, they propagate this myth, right? At the very senior levels, join duty. Everybody has to go on join duty in order to be promoted, to GS-15. So all of them. But once you start applying for join duty and actually win it, because it's very difficult, as a lot of people, a lot of very qualified competitors. But if you're not, one of the minions who are towing the party line, there's no way you're going to go on joint duty to such important organizations like the DNI, which is extremely politicized.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's interesting. I've called the 2015, 2016, 2017 DIA and FBI efforts, the overall intelligence community efforts, is Soviet level wrongdoing. And I think, it is. And I've said this publicly because I think that many of these folks exist within a system that mimics the Soviet Union. And you just said it. It's like you have to basically be part of the political class before you're able to get any benefit. And if you don't toe the line, they'll do a whisper campaign to undermine your credibility. It's very Soviet. It really is. So again, I encourage people to pick up your book because I think they're going to learn a great deal about how badly compromised the senior levels of our government are. And it's great to know that Putin's a bad guy. I get it. People who I trust have told me he has personally murdered reporters in elevators in Moscow. I get it. But it's like, he's a bad guy. He's evil. And you've laid out kind of his path of how he does his methodology. The bad thing is others on our side have adapted his tactics. That's the danger here. And I think your book kind of, I think, does a great job of spelling it out. Now let's go to that last point then. So you sit down as an American citizen who understands the threat we're facing. You see the same threat play out before your eyes within our own system. You decide to do a book. So no surprise, since I did something similar as we've talked about in person. I did a book, Operation Dark Heart, which, surprise, surprise, DIA didn't dig. even though the Army cleared it and others had been, others who were actually in the book had seen it and had no problems with it. It was the Defense Intelligence Agency who really did get a black eye, got even a bigger black eye when they decided to redact everything because, oh my goodness. By the way, as you know, the DI ended up losing the First Amendment lawsuit because, again, surprise, most of the information in the book I had been cleared by them for purposes of my testimony and when I was a whistleblower. So they lost. But it didn't stop them from doing essentially what I believe was a wholesale retaliation and harassment. So you had to face the same thing. Tell us about your experience dealing with the Defense Intelligence Agency trying to get your book cleared and out when it contains, I think, provably open information that most people should know, but it's simply it's not available because I think a great deal of DI and the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about it. It's not classified. It's just they don't want to talk about it. So tell us about your experience on this.
Very similar to yours, Tony. So not only people don't want to talk about it, sometimes they're not able to access that information because I'm a native Russian speaker. So I can go directly with google.ru or yandex.ru and type in keywords in Russian to get information that rivals top secret, gamma, et cetera, et cetera. And believe it or not, well, you probably know this, but maybe some of your listeners don't, even in the intelligence community, many analysts don't have that capability.
That's right.
They're relying on someone else to do the searches, right? So yes, you and I know that we couldn't have possibly included classified information in our books because they would have thrown us in jail, right? So
that's exactly correct.
We're not stupid. We don't play those games. So of course I included everything that was unclassified, but they blacked out 31 pages worth of text from my book claiming classified information that wasn't classified because they didn't want the American people to learn about all of their incompetence and how they mishandled the Russian threat, not only during the 2016 election, but overall. And some of the CIA intelligence officials admitted themselves, such as Gina Haspel, that the intelligence community didn't prioritize Russia for a long time, and hence we're in this situation. So it was definitely a retaliation on the part of DIA against me for criticizing them for all of the deficiencies and all of the sort of incompetent actions with regard to Russia and Putin, and really underestimating the threat and not putting proper resources against this highly important target.
No, well said. And I know that others who I admire and have worked with recognize the threat. When General Joseph Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was up for confirmation, he was asked the question, what is the greatest threat against the United States? He said Russia. And his thinking was very clear. It's like capacity, intention, and willingness. It's like, do you have the capacity? Yes. Do you have the will to do it? Yes. Do you have the objectives to do it? Yes. These things have all continued. While Russia, while China and others do have an intent, they don't have the capacity to actually do some of this stuff. And I would argue that DIA failed badly in actually making objective assessments of threat. And I think, obviously, from experience, they don't like being criticized for failure. And the latest failure, obviously, is Afghanistan, where I think many of their analysts, not all, but many, were right alongside saying, oh, no, Afghanistan is fine. Don't worry about it. It's so I'm just letting you know that I think embarrassment is the greatest sin that you can commit against DIA. You can look. I've heard of senior executives having lap dances by their secretaries in bars, and they're fine with that, as long as you're towing. I am not joking. I am not joking. I could tell you.
I believe you.
And I could get in trouble for it. But I know these guys. They will have sex with their secretaries in their offices. And everybody's fine with that because they're towing the line, so to speak. You can have a Kamala Harris light that you're sleeping with and promoting and giving bonuses to. Right. as long as you're towing that line, it's no big deal. But the moment you cross it, Rebekah, you say something against the Soviet leaders of DIA, it's all over. You're out. So
right.
Yeah.
And interesting, I just say something when I told my editor how, DIA redacted, some of the stuff claiming it was classified, it redacted my criticism of their incompetence. The editor said, oh, I wish I can tell my customers when they criticize me for my incompetence, I wish I could say, oh, it's classified. You can't talk about that. You can't tell people.
Yeah. So Rebekah, thank you for being on Thought to Action today. I love your book. As a matter of fact, so just so everybody knows, I do actually have a copy. I've gone through it a couple different times. I can't say I've read every single chapter, but I've hit the high points. And I think people are going to learn a great deal of information regarding how we actually still have a legitimate Russia threat, one that our leaders continue to play into the hands to. This whole thing of allowing Putin to have the pipelines into Europe. People don't need to go back, a place called Baku. Do these people not recognize that Stalin himself recognized the importance of pipelines and using those to control those around him? I mean, am I wrong here, Rebekah? How is it we don't learn this stuff?
I know, it's mind-boggling, and it's despicable that President Biden gave this biggest gift to Putin, waiving the sanctions from Nord Streams, because the Russian defense industry hinges on its ability to produce oil and gas and sell it. And so what President Biden has done, he hampered our own ability to be the key energy producer, and he augmented Russia's. Right. It actually makes no sense to me why he does this. And then the left was screaming how, Trump was soft on Russia. Trump pursued the hardest, the most robust policy against Russia since Ronald Reagan.
Right.
And he was constantly called, Putin's agent. And look at President Biden. He gave them the summit. He reached out himself to Putin to have a meeting with him. And then he gave them effectively the freedom to have a solo press conference where Putin continued to run his disinformation campaign, denigrating the United States. And now President Biden continues, gifting all of these various, gifts to Putin that are going to be used against us. And he has not done anything to counter Putin's cyber warfare. That continues every day.
So look, I'm one of those, again, who came up through the Cold War, and one of the lessons I learned from the Soviet Union, which I don't think has changed, and I think Putin has adapted this, was the philosophy of what's ours is ours and what's yours is negotiable.
Yes.
And how Joe Biden and the current administration doesn't understand that is beyond me. And look, I'm not a Russia expert. I look to people like you to kind of help me understand this. I'm a generalist. I look at technology, techniques, and national issues from a broad perspective. And even I know this. So it's really disappointing to see that Biden is either so badly compromised or so willing to bend over to try to facilitate assisting. Look, I don't want to say Putin's an avowed enemy, but he's certainly not our friend. And his objectives are those which the Soviet Union had pursued, again, going back to the beginning of the 20th, of the 19th, well, at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. This is something they have always done. And to fundamentally to play into Putin's hands so consistently, one has to wonder what's going on. But with that said, people need to read your book, Putins Playbook. It's important because people need to understand that this is a relevant, ongoing issue that's not going away anytime soon. Rebekah, where can people check you out also? What's more information they can come talk to you or get a hold of you on this?
Sure. Thank you, Tony. I have a website, RebekahKoffler.com. I have also another website that I'm running called whitehousedossier.com. And I run a newsletter that people can subscribe to from the whitehousedossier.com. The newsletter is called Cut to the News, where every day I deliver basically a summary of all the very important news of the day, and I put my own commentary that my readers really appreciate because of my intelligence background and because of having been born in the Soviet Union. So I usually comment on socialism. That's another danger that that we haven't talked about. Hopefully at some point we will. A lot of people are enamored right now with socialism, and that's threat number one, I would say. It destroyed the Soviet Union, and I don't want it to destroy my adopted homeland. And I totally am having flashbacks right now.
No, I always tell people, if you want to see how completely devoid of any humanity the Soviet Union became, look at the series Chernobyl. That HBO series encapsulates the complete and utter failure of that system and their complete disdain for human life or any concerns about that. But we should have you back to talk. As a matter of fact, maybe we'll talk about that issue and some other things soon. But Rebekah, thank you for being with us today. Obviously, I like your book. I like it a lot. I hope people will pick it up and read it. I'd like to have you come back and talk to us again in the near future about some of these issues, which we've only started talking about today.
Thank you, Colonel Shaffer. It's my honor.
Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in today to Thought to Action from the London Center for Policy Research, where we always delve deeply into issues and explore all the facts as they are, not as people want them to be, which makes us very popular at times. With that said, please check us out on all the different social media outlets, Twitter, Facebook, and obviously on YouTube. We're on the other new social media outlets as well. Be sure and check those out. We'll have those linked here on our video. So I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, President of the London Center for Policy Research, and we'll see you again very soon.